Welcome to Auto Mundial, the weekly car news and reviews show, where this week we're checking out the new Porsche 911 Turbo S as it faces off against the Audi R8. We also have two chic new super minis from Renault and Peugeot, plus a crossover from Hyundai and the all-new Nissan Qashqai. That's all coming up, but first...
BMW has slashed the price of the i3 in the UK following adjustments to the government's plug-in car grant. With the announcement that cars over £35,000 will no longer be eligible for the government's £2,500 grant from March of this year, BMW has dropped the base price of the i3 to £33,805, so buyers can still get the grant with room for a few options. Top spec cars have been reduced too, with the high-spec IS3 dropping from £39,000 to just under £35,000. No equipment has been removed from any models despite the drop in price. Good news for anyone after BMW's ageing EV.
Years now, the Nissan Qashqai has been the UK's best-selling SUV thanks to its combination of practicality and good value. Very impressive, especially when you consider the current second-gen car has been on sale since 2013. Now though, finally, Nissan has unveiled its replacement. And it seems that Nissan hasn't mucked about too much with its popular family SUV recipe. While it still looks familiar, the styling has been thoroughly modernised and now incorporates the Japanese brand's new design language that we've already seen on the new Juke and Micra. Nissan has sold over 1 million crossovers in the UK alone since the first Qashqai launched in 2007. So, understandably, the styling isn't at all showy or over the top. It looks smarter and chunkier than the old car, despite it only growing 35mm in length and 32mm in width. The roof is painted in contrasting black paint to create a lower stance, while optional big alloy wheels help it to look a bit more premium. Inside, the new Qashqai is even more practical than before, thanks to an extended wheelbase for more passenger space. The boot is bigger too, now up to 504 litres, while up front the cup holders have been moved to make gear changes a bit easier. It may not be the flashiest interior in the class, but it looks nice and modern, with some horizontal dashboard architecture and a big infotainment screen with built-in Google Street View, as well as Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. Perhaps the biggest shake-up to the Qashqai formula is under the bonnet. Nissan has decided to ditch all the diesel engines available in the old car, with buyers now getting a choice of an updated version of the old 1.3 petrol, now with mild hybrid assistance, and a new e-Power model. The 1.3 is available with either 138 or 156 brake horsepower and front or all-wheel drive. The e-Power model, though, works a bit differently. Unlike a full series hybrid like a Toyota Prius, though, the 1.5-litre petrol motor doesn't give any drive to the wheels, instead acting as a generator to power the batteries and electric motors. In theory, this version should drive much like an electric car, but without the hassle of charging it.
But if the Qashqai wants to hold on to its crown in the segment it spawned, it'll need to face up to some stiff competition. This is the Skoda Karoq, and while it might not quite have the heritage of the Nissan, it's one of our favourite cars in this class. Unlike the Peugeot 3008 or the new Vauxhall Mocha, its styling is rather conservative. The exterior is restrained and classy, but the cabin takes that attitude a bit too far, with lots of drab grey plastic and little in the way of flamboyance. But to most family buyers, the main draws will be the Karoq's versatility and practicality. If you go with the Vario Flex rear seat option, you can alter the amount of passenger space and boot capacity you have, giving you a bit more room than you get in the Nissan. There's a much broader selection of petrol and diesel engines too, although no full hybrid model like the Qashqai's e-power system.
Cars like the Skoda Karoq, though, wouldn't exist if Nissan hadn't created such a popular segment of the market when it first released its hatchback-sized Qashqai in 2007. But we'll have to wait and see if this new car continues its best-selling legacy.
A couple of decades ago, the French ruled the super mini class. Cars like the Peugeot 206 and Renault Clio sold in their millions, while Citroen Saxo helped to resurge the hot hatch market. In more recent years, however, the Ford Fiesta and Volkswagen Polo have been taking class honours. So, how have the French brands responded? Well, both Renault and Peugeot have new models out, and both have the Fiesta firmly in their sights. This is the latest iteration of the Clio, a name which has been a European bestseller since its inception 30 years ago. The previous model entered production in 2012 and is one of the only cars we can think of that actually increased its annual sales every year. Now, though, Renault has replaced it, although you might not realise that at first. You have to look carefully to notice the differences, but Renault insists that this is an all-new car and not just a facelift. While styling has clearly been borrowed from the old car, this new model is, in fact, a bit smaller. It's shorter and lower, but Renault has somehow managed to create more space inside. The new car doesn't actually share any parts with the old one, and the more you look at it, the more obvious the differences become. For starters, there are the C-shaped LED headlights like you get on a Megane. Then you notice the cleaner lines, sharper bumpers and bigger alloy wheels. It's a smart-looking car, but the Clio always has been. In the past, though, the chic little Clio was always let down by a drab, cheap, plasticky interior. Thankfully, though, this new one is greatly improved. It's well equipped and just as well trimmed as any of its rivals. The Clio gets a range of conventional petrol and diesel engines, starting with a 75 brake horsepower 1-litre petrol motor and topping out with a 129 bhp 1.3. There aren't any plans for an electric version, with Renault simply stating that customers after an electric Super Mini can get a Zoe, but hybrid versions are in the pipeline.
But if you do want a French electric Super Mini that isn't a Zoe, Peugeot has you covered with this, the all-new 208. Available as an EV or with a selection of combustion engines, the 208 is by far the boldest Super Mini on sale. It joins the 508 and an array of SUVs in the brand's lineup with some truly unique styling. In fact, the 208 looks so cool it's hard to believe it shares its platform with the new Corsa. At the front, the chrome grille and piercing headlights are some of our favourite design features. There's a 208 badge above the grille, a tribute to the classic 504, and of course the iconic lion. Meanwhile, at the rear, the angular C-pillar shape harks back to the 205, the original Peugeot Super Mini, while the taillights are designed to look like a claw. Step inside and Peugeot interiors just seem to get better and better. From the 508, Peugeot has turned it up a notch further with high-quality plastic and leather finishes. The stitching in the door panels and around the seats are particularly well put together, giving the whole car an almost German feel. We're still not sure about the small and strangely positioned steering wheel, but overall it looks fabulous. The new 208 is available with a 1.2-litre 3-cylinder or a 1.5-litre diesel, but it's the electric E208 which came as the biggest surprise. The EV looks exactly the same as a regular car, only the little E badges give you any indication that it's any different. The E208 has a range of over 200 miles and can charge to 80% within half an hour.
Both of these cars then have put the French manufacturers back to the top of the super mini class. They are stylish, well built and better equipped than ever, and are finally proper alternatives to Fiestas and Polos.
After the break, the new Hyundai Kona and the 911 Turbo S.
Coming up, the Porsche 911 Turbo and Audi R8. But first,
since its launch in 2017, the Hyundai Kona has offered crossover buyers something a bit different from the more obvious choices. It looks cool and modern and manages to stand out from the rest of Hyundai's lineup while still remaining true to the Korean brand's design language. And now for 2021, it's had a refresh. But when we say refresh, we pretty much mean restart. The new Kona looks better than ever following its heavy facelift. External updates include a new front grille, reshaped bumpers and fancy new lights all round. The front end looks like some sort of alien, particularly on the sporty-looking N-line models. We're especially fond of the Audi-style vents above the grille, although lower trim levels don't look quite so angry with fewer scoops and crevices. Interior design tweaks are less significant, with a restyled centre console being the biggest aesthetic change, although there are some updated features and a new selection of trim finishes. Hyundai has thoroughly refreshed the tech and infotainment too. There's now a 10.25-inch digital instrument panel from the i20, and the central touchscreen has been enlarged from 7 to 8 inches and is fitted as standard with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. So what about performance? Well, happily, there is a diverse range of powertrains on offer. The range-topping petrol motor uses a 1.6-litre turbocharged 4-cylinder engine with 195 brake horsepower and is available with front or four-wheel drive and paired with a 7-speed autobox. Below this, there's a 1.6-litre 134 brake horsepower diesel with a 48-volt mild hybrid system and paired with either an auto or manual box. And then there's the entry-level 118 brake horsepower 1.0-litre turbocharged 3-cylinder petrol model, again available with mild hybrid power. There's an electric one too that can do up to 300 miles on a charge and hit 62 miles per hour from rest in 7.9 seconds. And if that isn't enough, a sporty Kona N is expected at some point in the near future with the engine from the i30N hot hatch. That means it should get around 250 horsepower to rival the likes of the Volkswagen T-Roc R.
Speaking of rivals, the Hyundai has its fair share of competition. Few cars in this class come close to the wild styling of the Hyundai, but this, the Toyota CHR, certainly stands out. Like the Kona, it has been updated only recently with a bolder front profile and revised headlights, just some of the new external details. Under the bonnet too, the Toyota has a good range of engines, from a 1.2 petrol turbocharged motor all the way to a 2-litre hybrid. And inside, there's new infotainment, which includes connectivity for Apple, Amazon and Android systems, although it is a little clunky and can take some getting used to. And while it is eye-catching, that sloped coupe-like roofline doesn't do much for the practicality, and in this market, that is key. So then, what about this, the Nissan Juke? The Juke pretty much started this class. It's nearly 10 years old now, and its love it or hate it styling with a strange front end and a chunkier rear end has split critics ever since. One thing's for sure though, it turns heads, even next to the Kona. But the Juke is let down by its lack of engine options. The only engine offered from launch is a 1-litre turbocharged 3-cylinder petrol from the Micra with either a 6-speed manual gearbox or an all-new 7-speed dual-clutch automatic replacing the old CVT transmission. It is likely though that a hybrid will join the lineup at some point, and maybe even an electric version. On the road, it doesn't feel quite as modern as it looks either, and the cabin does look rather busy and cluttered.
But for now, the lack of powertrain options that let it down, and in a segment where there's no end of variety, that won't really do. So it seems that the king of the compact crossovers has been dethroned. But with cars like the Toyota CHR and Hyundai Kona on sale, we can't say that we're surprised.
When we first saw the new 992 generation Porsche 911, it's fair to say that we weren't exactly blown away. It was bigger, heavier and less pretty than the model that came before it. But it was packed full of incredible kit and the interior really impressed. We were also pleased to see it was still available with a manual gearbox, and that Porsche had, thus far at least, resisted the urge to electrify it. What we were really excited for though was the turbo version, and here it is. This is the new 911 Turbo S, with 641 brake horsepower and all the usual turbo styling cues. It gets some turbo-specific wheels which are wider at the back than the front, an even wider body than standard Carreras with those classic side air intakes, and of course the signature rear wing, letting everyone behind you know exactly what you're driving. It's worth bearing in mind that the previous version launched with around 550 horsepower, while this one gets 641 from its 3.8-litre flat six. The 0 to 62 time has shrunk to 2.7 seconds, while the 205 miles per hour top speed is unchanged. But at this level, even slight gains are impressive. But every detail has been improved. It now generates more downforce, while the new wet weather mode will make the already infallible all-wheel drive system even less likely to get out of shape in bad conditions. The suspension has been upgraded too, with faster reacting dampers and lower springs. It also retains the four-wheeled steering to keep it agile and disguise its bulk. The turbo has always tipped the 911 into supercar territory, and this one is no different. It'll be competing against Audi R8s and the Sports Series cars from McLaren, but it is priced to match. The regular turbo comes in at £139,000, while the S tips the scales at £160,000.
But is a supercar with the engine hanging right out the back still as competitive as it once was? After all, if you want a German supercar for about the same money, the Audi R8 still offers a huge amount of bang for your buck. While the rest of the supercar world downsizes with turbos and hybrid setups, the R8 prefers the sonic growl of a mid-mounted, naturally aspirated 5.2-litre V10. The R8 received a refresh last year, with the V10 performance model putting out 611 brake horsepower and the standard model also getting a boost up to 562. That means there's plenty of power on tap to reach 62 miles per hour in 3.1 seconds, thanks to its all-wheel drive system and a top speed of 206. Sharing much of its DNA with the Lamborghini Huracan, the Audi can be heard from miles around as the howling V10 races up to the 8,500 RPM red line. It provides a sense of occasion and drama that the Porsche can't quite manage, although we suspect the R8's noise might become a little tiresome if you chose to use it every day. It's a real fire-breathing supercar then, and a very tempting alternative to the somewhat more sedate 911 Turbo.
However, the Porsche has heritage on its side, and some very loyal customers who will no doubt fill the order book in no time. The 911 Turbo continues to do things differently while remaining as competitive as ever.
Join us again next week on Auto Mundial for something a bit different as we check out the eccentric Hispano Suizu Carmen.